Welcome to Behind the Emotion. This is a video series where we are looking to empower your emotional evolution. I'm Jade from Jade Sterling Coaching. I am a positivity coach and a nurse, a counselor, a yoga therapist, a wife and a mum. I bundle all of my skills and experience into these videos just for you. I also create individualized coaching programs, group classes, online events, retreats, all of which support you to move into the best version of yourself that you possibly can. And today I'm talking about positivity parenting, which sounds like a new flavor of parenting, but really it just explains the tools that I use when working with parents and children. And it also gives us an idea of what we're doing, what we're working towards, an enjoyable, positive experience in our parenting journey. Now, the inspiration for this video came from a quote that I saw on social media. I actually found it on Sarah Daly Play Therapy, Northern Rivers, New South Wales, Australia. I highly recommend Sarah Daly Play Therapy for any behavioural or developmental issues you're having with your children. She credited this quote to Bridget Miller, and when I read it, I thought that resonates with me so much because it gives me a deeper understanding of what I do and why it's so effective. So I want to share it with you. This reads, "Parenting is a relationship, not a technique. That's why we should keep more on connection and less on instruction." Really got me thinking about connection versus instruction. When you hear those two words together, they have different energies. It seems obvious that they would result in different actions, which when I speak to parents about this, they agree with and can recognize that connection sounds more like working with your child, whereas instruction sounds more like telling your child what to do. Now, while this may seem clear, I find that when I start looking at the issues that parents are having with their children, that they are actually focusing much more on instruction and less on connection. And when you have a child that's not following instruction or not interpreting it in the way that it's intended to be delivered and received, then we end up with what I call a miscommunication complication, which is just one big great knot of communication. So that knot needs to be untied. So when I sit with families to start untying the knot, I've actually found there to be a theme, an underlying theme within all of the issues, and that is ultimately what parents want to do is to control their child's behavior. Now, this is called being a normal human parent. I'm in this boat as well. Most of us as parents, we have an idea about what it should look like on the outside. But quite often we lose sight of, or we're not actually paying attention to how it feels on the inside. That is all the difference when we're looking at connection versus instruction. So when parents come to talk to me about the issues they're having with their children, the first thing I do is teach them the positivity model. You may or may not have heard me talk about that before. The positivity model was developed and created by Dr. Paul Jenkins. Check him out on YouTube at Live on Purpose TV. He is my coach and teacher and mentor. And this model that he has created is a very powerful tool. And when we start to look at it, we can see how it helps to foster connection rather than instruction. And while I won't be going into this model in its entirety today, that's in another video, we're going to look at where I start with parents who feel like they're stuck in a rut, who are feeling quite negative about their relationship or their interaction with their children, who even feel helpless and hopeless. The positivity model starts by looking at what it is. And what it is are the circumstances. They're the situation, the facts of the situation and what's actually happening in your life. This is important to be aware of. People often come with a bag of issues, and the only way to really be able to unpack the bag effectively and to be able to find solutions to move forward is by looking at very specific examples, very particular incidences or events that are occurred, words that are being said, actions that are being done, to be able to look at the circumstances or the facts of the situation. What the positivity model teaches is that all circumstances are in fact neutral. They're neither good nor bad, they're only what you think they are. So when you think that things should be better, you're going to feel worse, and that is what you're going to experience. And when you can see how they could be worse, then you feel better. And that is what you experience. This is a very simplified version, but it's where I start with parents, because I don't think it needs to be any more complicated than that. To begin with, this is the starting point. Let me repeat all of that. Circumstances are neutral. They're neither good nor bad. They're only what you think they are. When you think things should be better, you feel worse. That becomes your experience. When you can see how things could be worse, you feel better, and that becomes your experience. It's as simple and as difficult as that. Let me give you an example that happened just yesterday when my family and I were coming back from an interstate trip from visiting family. My husband, myself, our 2 boys who are 10 and 7. We were boarding the plane. We were crossing the tarmac to board the plane, and my youngest son started having a meltdown that he needed the food that was in his backpack right now, immediately. And he started unpacking his bag. And there were people everywhere, and we're all trying to get onto the plane. So I tried to explain as calmly as I could why we couldn't do this here and now. Wait till we get on the plane, repack the backpack, get him moving along. He stops, unpacks the backpack. I repack the backpack, move him along. You can see where this is going, all the way to our seats, where eventually he tips the whole contents of his bag into his seat to find the food that he was looking for, and then calmly repacked his bag, set the bag aside, and buckled in ready for takeoff. I myself was very distressed by the time I was buckling myself in. I was very stressed out, very frustrated, very flustered. And as we were about to get ready for takeoff, my thoughts were, it should be better than this. He's 7 years old. I shouldn't have had to drag him all the way across the tarmac to get here. As we're ready to leave, a family, very flustered, seemingly stressed out, boards the plane. They're obviously late. They're a few rows ahead. There's a man and a woman and 2 young girls who were definitely much younger than my boys. The girls were sitting with their parents, and then the father starts to strap in the older girl, who started to panic. And she started kicking and screaming, kicking the seat in front of her. She was obviously very distressed, and the people around her were very distressed, and they were trying to settle her down so that the plane could take off because they couldn't get her seatbelt on. That's when I realized, of course, that my situation could have been much worse. My own son was actually old enough to reason with, albeit that I had to drag him all the way to his seat, but then he calmly sorted himself out and sat down for takeoff. I suddenly had that thought that it could have been worse. That gave me a feeling of relief that then settled down my whole nervous system, and I was able to think more clearly, to the extent where I felt like I had the capacity to go up and offer my assistance to the family. I offered them some of the food that we'd packed that my son was so eager to be able to have access to. And while they declined, it was the interaction that actually stopped the little girl. She looked at me with big wide eyes and said, "Thank you, kind lady." And she stopped crying, and her dad buckled her in, and we were all good to go. So while that situation was what it was, my situation was me stopping and starting with my son, stopping and starting. We got to our seats. Circumstances for that family was they got on the plane, but they weren't able to do up the belt for the daughter, who was kicking and screaming. Whether that was good or that was bad was only how we were thinking about it. So initially I thought my situation was bad. When I thought that it could have been worse, I felt better. And then that informed my actions as to what I did next. Simple chain of events, not necessarily easy, but powerful once we're aware of it, where it starts and where it's coming from. This is also powerful because it works the same with our children. So when I was preparing for this video, I started to think, if we can understand how it works, and if we can slow it down for ourselves and become more aware of our thoughts, from this place, can we move into acceptance of what it is without trying to control or change our child's behavior? Because what's happening for us is ultimately happening for them too. The positivity model teaches us that ultimately how we act upon our circumstances stems from our feelings. Our feelings are a result of what we're thinking about what it is, and only we are 100% in control or responsible for our thoughts. Once we've actually got the capacity to dial it down and become more aware of our thoughts, we can consciously choose which ones we'll keep and which ones are not serving us. And from this place, we can understand that that's where our actions come from. And as I said, it's the same for our children. Do you have control over what your child is thinking? No, not at all. And we've just learnt that the thoughts generate the feelings, which then inform our actions. So if we're trying to control them, we have to do it at the thought level. And can we do that? No, not at all. What we can do is we can work with them to create a connection, to get them to cooperate with us. This goes back to the control and maturity model that I've talked about in a previous video. You can go back and review that. But really, this is focusing on connection and how we can interact in our communication. To develop connection, to work with our children, fosters cooperation and us to be able to work together, which is much more effective than trying to just offer them instruction and offer them thoughts, selling them our own thoughts day in, day out, which actually has been shown to not be beneficial to our children. When we spoon feed them information and thoughts that they should be thinking, it doesn't allow them to develop independent thought, problem solving, independent reasoning, and then to be able to process things themselves. So it just goes back to all circumstances are neutral. They're not good or bad. They're only what we think they are. And our thoughts create how we feel about it, and our feelings create our actions. Same goes for our children. So ultimately we can't control them, but we can control how we interact with them and how we connect with them on a daily basis. When we think it should be better, we feel worse. When we can see how it could be worse, we feel better. And that creates our experience of whatever it is. Keeping in mind that things can always be better, but things could always be worse. Everything is in the middle of what is. Always be better, always be worse. So for more information about any of that, or if you would like some support or some guidance, or if you would like to deepen your connection in your relationship with your children, don't hesitate to reach out to me through the link in the description below. And always remember to keep it simple, to keep it soft, and remember to exhale. That's positivity parenting in action. I'll see you in the next video.